When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about how to choose childcare. So if you are a new and expectant parent, I would suspect it is on your mind to think, how am I going to care for this child 24/7? And I'm hoping you are not alone in caring for this child 24/7. So whether you're going back to work full time or you just need some coverage a few hours a day, childcare is a really important thing. And figuring out what is right for you and your family and your circumstances, it's going to be different for everyone. So we're going to jump into helping you think, what is the best choice for you? And by doing that, we're going to lay out the difference between a nanny versus daycare. So in this conversation, I have Elizabeth Narins. Let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth. She is a mother of two and a freelance writer who has previously held staff positions at Cosmo, Women's Health. Her work has appeared in Scary Mommy, What to Expect, The Bump, Parents, and many more. And Elizabeth is launching a parenting Substack, More Than Mom, that explores identity, career, body image, and all the child-rearing questions that keep new parents up at night. Now, I found Elizabeth when I stumbled upon her article called Nanny versus Daycare, Which is Right for You? And as I read through it, I thought, this is perfect. She really helps lay out the difference, the pros and cons of nanny, the pros and cons of having a daycare, and helping you make choices that's best for you. We go over some red flags that you might see with a nanny or a daycare, and even questions to ask and ways for you to figure out the priorities for you. It is so individual about who you want to care for your child and where that is. There's no right answers. And so I'm hoping this conversation will shed some light on that for you. Now, before we get to that conversation, I always just love to give you updates about what's happening at PYC. So, actually nothing has really changed. We're still going super strong with our classes in person and online. We have a full on-demand library. And of course, our teacher training is going strong. So I guess check all that out on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. And then as always, I like to take a moment to thank you, our listener, for coming back and supporting our online community with the podcast. And if you have an idea of a podcast I haven't covered or a guest you think would be wonderful to speak with, send all that to me at deb@prenatalyogacenter.com. All right, I think that's all you need to hear from me. Let's take a super quick break, and we come back. Please enjoy my conversation with Elizabeth.
Congrats! You're pregnant! Now, what do you do during the next 9 months? You need Preggy Pals. We educate and entertain expectant mothers and those hoping to become pregnant. Each episode features pregnant moms-to-be as well as experts. Together, we explore topics aimed to embrace pregnancy and empower women as they give birth to their babies. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Preggy Pals podcast." And be sure to visit newmommymedia.com to check out our other parenting shows, Newbies, Parent Savers, Twin Talks, and The Boop Group. Preggy Pals, your pregnancy, your way.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really great. Thank you for taking your time to come on and talk about choosing childcare because I know as someone that has two kids, I know you have two kids, when childcare falls apart, it it can really disrupt the whole family. So I'm looking forward to picking your brain a bit. But I guess before we get into our topic, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what sparked your interest in writing about parenthood issues and parenting.
Sure. So my background is in media. I studied journalism and kind of took it from there with staff positions at Women's Health and Cosmo. Then I left to lead digital content at Weight Watchers and had my first child shortly after going into lockdown in Brooklyn in 2020. So it was a very interesting time to become a parent. And I had already realized that I really missed writing and had begun freelancing for a few outlets, pitching articles about pregnancy and kind of what that was like for me as a fitness editor turned, expectant parent. And then from there, I realized after I had my son that it was going to be very difficult for me to go back to my corporate America job with my baby growing up on the other side of the wall or in daycare, as the case was. And so I went freelance and I really haven't looked back. I've written for parenting outlets ranging from Scary Mommy to The Bomb, Parents, Very Well Family, What to Expect, really hit all the big players. And then recently launched a Substack called More Than Mom, which explores identity and parenting, as well as all of the questions that keep new parents up at night. So it felt like a very organic turn from previous beats to parenting. They say, write about what you know, and that parenting just gives you so much editorial fodder. It's truly a gift to writers. So here I am.
I love that. And yeah, parenting, I feel like as a yoga teacher, I'm always talking to my students. My lived experience as a parent helps me so much with communicating and relating to them. So I'm really excited to jump into this. But before we get into the childcare stuff, what is your favorite topic to write about when it comes to parenthood? I know we'll get into childcare. That, listeners, don't worry, but I want to pick Elizabeth's brain a little bit more.
I really love when something comes up in the course of my own parenting that I can't figure out. I love kind of using my editorial expertise, pitching that article and kind of calling up the expert and just asking. So for instance, I've done this a lot with sleep training. I just feel like I cannot get it right. I have a 4.5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, and I still cannot figure out how to get the entire family to sleep through the night. So I have my, source on auto dial. I call her up, I write an article about it, and then we're all, the wiser for it.
I have to say that's one of my favorite things about doing podcasts is I often gravitate towards subjects that not only will I think that the listener will like, but that I'm interested in. It's like I can pick their brains, especially when it comes to parenting and child behavior. That's kind of my thing. So let's jump into our topic. So let's start talking a little bit more about choosing childcare. So what are some things to consider when choosing a nanny versus a daycare?
So I deeply labored over this decision with my first when I was pregnant because I could not possibly fathom how I would feel about childcare once I gave birth. And then I gave birth on the onset of a pandemic. So safety really, really figured into my decision. Especially with, everyone working from home, I kind of felt like I could stretch it out a little bit. I could work with the baby at my feet. I could work during naps. I could, toss the baby back and forth between myself and my husband when each of us had meetings and so forth. It's kind of like everyone was doing that. So I put this decision off for quite a while. And then when it comes to actually choosing, it came down to some real fundamentals. It was budget. It was logistics, like did we need full-time care? Did we need part-time care? Could we have someone in our home while we were working from home? And then it also came out to, our son's individualized needs, like how much control were we willing to give away? How much did we want him to be, socialized and on a schedule that accommodated, a group of kids versus how much should we want his childcare to follow our exact schedule and our exact directions and have a super controlled environment for him where we knew who he was playing with, who was talking to him, what toys he was playing with and all of that. So, I think also, I live in Brooklyn, so convenience was not as much of an issue for us. There's, a daycare on every block where I live. So, tons of different options. Whereas I can imagine people in different areas might have fewer options. But budget was also a big one for us, just jumping back to that, because I really tried to do the math here, like look at on an hourly basis. Like I could not wrap my head around the idea of spending such a large part of my salary on childcare. It just seemed incredulous at the time. But we came around to it finally and, just balanced our needs. We jumped in with daycare. That was kind of our first entree into childcare when my son turned 1. And again, this was, a full year of pandemic. So that was a big step for us. We waited a long time to get help. We did a part-time daycare, and it actually ended up being very much the wrong choice for us. We weren't willing to kind of give away so much control that we had over that first year. We didn't want him napping on a daycare schedule. We wanted him to sleep when he was tired, and we wanted him to sleep in, a pack and play, not fall asleep on the floor, which was the policy of the daycare that we chose, even though it was a very lovely and not inexpensive facility. You don't always get what you pay for, and you just don't always, you can't control everything with a daycare. So we pivoted, but we learned a lot in that first experience.
So let's pull back about budget. How might budget play a role when choosing childcare? I don't know if you have the numbers, and I'm sure they're going to be different depending on where someone lives, but I'm assuming comparing the hours of how much it costs for daycare versus nanny. I don't know if you have any of that information.
I don't have any firm numbers, but what I can say is that the equation is impossible. Just because the daycare that you pay for is not always the daycare that you get. And the same goes for babysitting, I guess, unless you have, a weekly contract. But let me back that up. When I tried to do the math for hours of coverage per week for daycare versus nannying, it ended up being several dollars less an hour for daycare versus one-on-one nannying. And as you said, rates vary so widely, as does what you actually get with that care. So there's many daycares I know in suburban areas where some of my friends have moved from Brooklyn, where they provide diapers, they provide meals, they provide snacks, all of these things. Whereas like the daycare that I was at, I was packing a bazillion snacks and meals. He was there for like half a day, but kind of putting all that into it. So yeah, the budget it's a tough one. It's always going to cost less to do a group daycare situation. I would say the next cheapest option is going to be a nanny share, which can work in a variety of ways. So it can be, multiple families hire one sitter, or it could be, you do 3 days a week with the same sitter that a friend shares and they do the other 2 days a week. It could be mornings and afternoons, depending on what kind of coverage you need. And then there's the one-on-one care with a nanny, or, excuse me, if you have multiples. It might be 2-on-1 care or whatever it is. But that's always going to be the most expensive. And that also can range. I've heard, a difference of maybe like $10 an hour at the top of the range versus bottom of the range. But it's always going to be a little bit more. And then what I've also learned is that for that kind of individualized care, you really do get what you pay for. When you try to, find a sitter who's willing to take less, they're not always going to be as, attentive or experienced, or there's a reason why they're charging less. It's because they don't necessarily have the experience to charge more, or they don't have the confidence to charge more, or whatever it is, or they're not aware of the market, which is a terrible situation to put someone in. But it's expensive no matter how you cut the deck. It's very expensive.
This is just anecdotal, or anecdotal. That's another, like using the data of just anecdotes. I was looking at some posts on Upper West Side moms, and I'm fascinated by nannies and how much it is. So currently, as we're recording this, the most recent I've seen is $30 up to $50 an hour for nannies. And I think it went like $50 to $60 an hour for 2 kids. I was a little shocked because back when I had my kids, my son is now 13, we did not pay that much an hour. And we also didn't have 40 hours a week. So I don't know what it currently is in Brooklyn, but this was Upper West Side. And that's that. And some people not in New York, their jaws might be dropping, but that's a lot. That's a big part of one's budget to consider for childcare.
That's enormous. I'm not familiar with those rates, nor can I afford those rates, but I've seen kind of in the $20 to $30 range more toward the 30 and certainly several dollars more for multiples. It is expensive. It is very expensive. And I mean, also when you look at alternative activities for kids, they're getting more expensive too. It's not like a $20 drop into a gym class anymore. It's more $40 to $50 to $60. So I don't know how people are affording this. I am a freelance writer. I don't have a set salary. I don't have, I think it all comes down to kind of cost versus benefit. I mean, and this is coming from a place of extreme privilege where I can say, how much do I want to work versus how much do I want to spend on childcare, and how do I balance that? But some people really don't have that option. When you're, an hourly wage worker, you have to find an option for your kids and have to figure out how that math is going to work for you. There's no easy answer. And I wish that there was a little bit more government support, honestly, on this. I guess this kind of brings me to another option that I totally passed over because it's not necessarily available on a full-time basis to me, but family members. And we're living very differently than I think generations before us have. But I mean, I think it used to be where grandparents were more in the picture, or in, different cultures or different environments. Grandparents are more in the picture. They're more available to help. They're younger. I mean, people are having babies into their, late 30s, early 40s, and grandparents are not going to be as able to help. But leaning on family members for help is, it's free, or I don't know what strings are attached. It's not always free, but it's cheaper. And it's also an option, I think, when the math just doesn't work out.
Yeah. And if someone's nearby and willing. So let's break down the pros and cons for nannies and the daycare route, because people listening might feel very overwhelmed and the numbers might feel very overwhelming. But let's break down why someone for their family might choose one over the other. So what are some of the pros and cons of having an individual nanny?
Okay, so I'm going to speak from my experience and also from some of my reporting, but specialized care is the biggest pro for me. You pay someone to cater specifically to your child's needs, their schedule. You don't have to compromise on who that person is or how they treat your child, as long as you're up for managing, what's essentially a personal employee. That takes time and effort as well. You have to be very clear about what you need from them. Otherwise, you don't get it. So, cons here, cancellation, or the big one is not getting what you need from them. So for instance, like if you need help with tasks around the house while your baby's sleeping or something like that, you have to ask for that up front, negotiate that up front. But reliability is definitely an issue. Like even from the best sitters, and we have one of the best sitters, but she's also a student. So there's times where she has a meeting with a professor or something that she needs to do. And we need to respect that to keep her happy and to keep the, relationship working. So it's that. It's a very high lift to find the right person for your family. And it's really hard to replace them if it doesn't work out. There's the cost of care, the fact that depending on who you hire and how much initiative you take, you might still be responsible for arranging your kids' play dates and classes and activities, just to make sure that your kids' days are fulfilling and active and so forth. So that was kind of a modge podge of pros and cons. But again, it's a nuanced decision, so we'll leave it at that.
My personal con was, and you touched on this, it is having an employee basically in your house. That is something that I found challenging because I kind of sat with the same thing as you. I didn't need somebody 40 hours a week, so I didn't need a full-time nanny. And I also didn't want full-time daycare because I was at home sometimes. And so we found someone in between, but it was still someone in my space and still managing that person. And setting, like you said, setting expectations, managing schedules, dealing when people are late. So that was my personal biggest con. And when we moved to the suburbs and my daughter was 2.5 heading into a preschool situation, I was so relieved because we'd been through almost 5 years of nannies and I found it stressful, but that's just me. So I just wanted to paint all the pictures out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having someone in your space is difficult. I find that as a freelance writer, I don't have an office to go to. So it kind of pushes me out of the house. I like to have, so my son is now in preschool and my daughter has a sitter. And what we try to do is have her ready to go in the stroller out. So they go out to the playground, they go out to, sometimes play dates, walks, whatever they do. I mean, as the weather gets colder, it becomes, more insulated, but try to get them out of the house. And then I try to get out of the house too. I go to a coffee shop or something, and it's good for my mental health. And it's good for, I think, my kids just be in different environments and so forth. So it's still that interaction. I think it just so deeply comes down to finding the right person, which is so much easier said than done. We went through several sitters that really did not work for us. And the hard part is when you have a little kid or a baby, you really don't know. Like, as my son had a sitter when he was younger, after this was post daycare, preschool, and it was only a few hours a day. We tried to kind of fit our work into, nap time, sitter time, after bedtime, which I don't recommend. But the sitter, took him out and about, and we didn't exactly know where she was going. Like, they went to the playground or the firehouse or whatever he wanted to do. But then he started to talk, and we would walk around town, and he would point out like Chipotle and be like, "Oh, such and such used to take me there." And I was like, that is really not on my itinerary. That's not my goal, to pay someone to take like my child to watch her eat lunch on a regular basis. Or Starbucks, he would do the same thing. And I started to kind of worry and look back and kind of think about what I had compromised by trying to find a flexible situation with someone who was super, super part-time and also super, super affordable. And I kind of really looked to do things differently with my second. And now we have a sitter who we love and who's very, reliable and responsible and transparent. We know where she is. We ask questions, we give directions, we create an itinerary of sorts. But it comes down to the right person for sure. This is your child. This is the person who's going to be, so influential to them and such a big part of their days.
So I definitely want to get into the pros and cons of daycare. But before we do, I'm wondering, since you've been through this yourself, and I am totally throwing this at you from left field, if there was anything that you looked out for during the interview process. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's dive into that if you're game for it. We'll be right back.
You've decided to give your baby breast milk. We want to help. We're the Boob Group, a group of moms and experts here to support you in your goals, whether you're breastfeeding, pumping, or something in between. Each week, a group of experienced moms openly discuss their success, their struggles, and society's impact on how they feed their babies. We provide an honest, natural, and judgment-free approach to breastfeeding, pumping, milk sharing, and more. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Boob Group podcast." The Boob Group, where moms know breast. You were probably expecting one, but got pregnant with two. We get it. Twin Talks encourages moms who are expecting twins as well as experienced moms of multiples. Together, we'll explore the unique challenges new parents face when raising two or more children of the same age. Join us as we embrace the joys of parenting when you've got double the duty. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Twin Talks podcast." And be sure to visit newmommymedia.com to check out our other parenting shows, Preggy Pals, Newbies, Parent Savers, and the Boob Group. Twin Talks, parenting times 2.
Okay, we are back. So I know I didn't prep you for this, so you can tell me if you're like, "No, Deb, I'd like to skip this." But if there's anything that you learned from the interview process when you were hiring nannies that you think is important, or red flags, or questions that you were so glad you asked, or questions that you wish you had asked?
Sure. So I bet you're expecting a better answer for this, considering I'm a professional journalist, but I kind of found that, people will answer questions in a way that is advantageous to them and makes them look good. So, you ask a potential nanny candidate, do you cross the street when the light is red? Of course, they're going to say, no, I wait for the walk signal, But then in practice, like, you go outside and see nannies crossing the street or jaywalking like all the time. So the second time around with my nanny search, I really leaned into personal recommendations. So I ended up hiring one of the nannies that had been working part-time for a family we knew. It was my son's classmate had several nannies because they had several children, and we used her in the mornings when that family didn't need her. And it worked out fairly well. She ended up needing to care for some family members. And she kind of moved on. And then the next nanny that we have had for coming up in a year, who's wonderful, was actually a recommendation from a mother in my mom's group, but it was one of her friends, which is interesting, not really a career nanny. And I've actually found that there's a real distinction between career nannies who have, 20 years experience. They raise their own kids. They raise several families worth of kids. They're amazing. They're just a different, kind of experience than someone who's maybe like a student or exploring a second career or just changing what they want to do and just love kids. So we opted with the latter. We've used the former and been very happy with them. But it is a distinction. And so it's kind of understanding like, why are you here? And this is kind of fickle, but I really like to know like what made you want to become a nanny? Is this your only option? It is for some, I totally acknowledge. Or is this something that you're really passionate about? Like for me, I really want my children to feel loved. And I know that this is a transactional relationship. Like I'm paying someone to spend time with my child, but I never want my child to feel that way. And I honestly don't want the nanny to feel that way. I want the nanny to feel like it's a good match. Like my sitter right now feels like my daughter is like her bud, and I think that that's an ideal situation. It doesn't always happen that way, but I want them to have some chemistry. And so it's not necessarily a question that you can ask. It's something you can observe. It's something you can do like a trial. That was a big learning. Instead of just hiring someone and being like, here are your hours, I'll pay you on Friday. It's kind of like, let's see how these next couple of days, let's see how they go. Let's see, is my child hysterical when I drop them off? Or is my child starting to really look forward to seeing that other person in their life? And I think the biggest learning is you really have to listen to yourself as a parent, your own intuition, and you have to listen to your child to the extent they can be, reasoned with and listened to, and just kind of go from there. And I'm saying all of this as if it's like, okay, nannies come and go, childcare comes and go. It's a big transition. It's very disruptive to change your childcare situation. But at the end of the day, you're going to feel less guilt and more able to be productive in the world, whatever it is you're going to do during those childcare hours, if you feel like it's a good fit for your child and it's a good fit for whoever's caring for your child.
I want to back up to something you said, because not everyone may know this, especially if it's a first-time parent and they're just starting to think about nannies and daycare and all the other options. But you said something about career nannies versus, like you said, like a college student, that it works for them. Can you describe what a career nanny would look like and like what their job might be and their background? And again, I'm kind of throwing this at you, and how that may differ in your commitment as an employer for a career nanny as opposed to somebody that is part-time, that's also like a student, or just it fits into their life better part-time.
Sure. So I think with a career nanny, their expectation is typically full-time. They would like to, be with a family, grow with a family, raise multiple kids in that family. And they're more used to kind of the typical job description of nanny, which is like show up at a specific time every day, leave at a specific time every day, take them where they need to go, maybe pack their lunches, maybe do some like light cleaning up after the kids. Like maybe it's like light laundry. Maybe it's, putting toys away. Maybe it's meal prep, whatever you kind of work out. They're probably expecting some kind of contract, some kind of set hours every week, some kind of salary, whether that's on the books or off the books. They are looking for full-time work. They identify as a nanny. That is their life goal and their desire. Whereas I would say more part-time sitters that I found they're doing something else. They're an actor. They work part-time at a play space, which is another sitter that we have in love. They're a student. They love kids. They appreciate kids. They, of course, need the income to kind of go on with their lives and support whatever else they're doing, but they're not looking for like a 20-year stint in raising other people's kids. And again, I'm just trying to be super neutral about this because we've had great career nannies and great sitters. Our needs are part-time. So what we have found is that when we try to hire a career nanny for part-time, they're like maybe a little less committed because it's just not the situation that they're always looking for. But this is highly individualized. This is individual people's careers. This is often mothers' careers. So I don't think that it's easy to put an umbrella over like, what is a career nanny and what does that situation look like? What are their desires and their goals and whatever? But it does, to me, feel like different brands of care, and pros and cons, certainly for both.
Yeah. And I remember, again, I never had this myself, but from what I have seen and when I even researched it momentarily, it's also bonuses and sick days. I mean, all employees in New York City get sick days. Vacation days included, travel. I know a lot of nannies got their Metro cards paid for. So it's like a job where one would have, not like a job. It is a full-time job where one had benefits, where a part-time or kind of, just sitter hours are different. All right, I'm going to shift us to the pros and cons of the daycare route. Can you share the pros and cons of daycare?
Sure. So daycare is typically less expensive. It's more reliable, assuming your child doesn't get sick, although they will get sick. Daycare drip is very, very real. It's social. It's scheduled, which is nice. Sometimes they provide diapers, wipes, snacks, meals, which is nice. They get exposure to foods that you don't have to prepare, which is a huge perk, especially when you have multiple kids. Community. One of the things that I was considering before I had my first child, and I was definitely on the daycare train for that, was that we really wanted to make, mom and dad friends. And so we saw that as an opportunity to kind of mesh with other parents in the neighborhood and socialize our child, because he was an only child at that point. I would say the cons, you have to bring your child there, and daycare drop-off can be a real nightmare if it's tough getting your kid out of the door, as it is for every parent, I think. There's no flexibility. You pay whether you take them there or not. So if they're sick, you pay. If homesick, I should clarify. If they're homesick, you still have to pay. If they have a national holiday, you still have to pay. Often it's hard to get out of contracts. Like if your work situation changes, you might lose your deposit. It can be hard to get into a daycare if there's a long wait list, if there's like only one daycare in your neighborhood, or if there's one daycare in your neighborhood that you'd like to go to. Other cons, you don't have control over the teachers necessarily. Like the daycare that we sent my son to briefly, it was owned by a woman who had a whole Montessori background. She had, early education master's degree. She seemed amazing on paper. And then the people that they hired were really not qualified at all to be around children, we found. You just have
Let's
very
just say
little
that's
control.
not the same with all daycares. I just want
No,
to put that out there.
Let me back up. I should be more neutral here. So many families I know have had wonderful experiences with daycares. They have daycare employees. Actually, I should back up and mention, I worked at a daycare. So I've seen the other side of it. This feels like a million years ago, and it was, because it was when I was in high school, but I always loved babies. I found that to be the most therapeutic, wonderful job. I loved being surrounded by a room full of babies. It was an after-school job, and I really put my all into that job. I loved it. I did a bazillion diapers. So I feel like a daycare setting can be a wonderful place for a kid to flourish, to socialize. It can be a really warm environment. There are great daycares. I come to this from a place where I had a very bad experience, but I also came to that experience where I was a control freak. I had very bad postpartum anxiety. I was raising a child. Essentially, I became a parent in isolation. I was raising a child in somewhat isolation because I was so scared of the world and so scared of what COVID could mean for us and for him. So it was a very different environment when I had personal experience in daycare, and all of my reporting, both personal and professional reporting, has really, gone gung-ho in the daycare direction. People love their daycares, and it's so much as just like with nannies and babysitters, it's about finding the right fit for your family and for your child. So I should just put that on the table as well.
So just like I mentioned about nannies, are there any things when people are looking at daycares that they should look out for as this is a great place, or like, I need to take an extra thought on this, or even questions to ask the daycare director, whoever is giving your tour?
Sure. So I think, how do you communicate with parents? Like, what are you just sharing pictures? Are you sharing like curriculum, I guess. Like we didn't have a great idea of what was going on in the classroom or daycare, whatever you want to call it. They saw themselves as a school where we went, and they didn't really share like what kind of age appropriate activities they would be doing. So we found like a lot of the activities they did were kind of staged for photo ops. And so what kind of communication is available to parents? How do you take feedback maybe is a good one? Or how do you, if your child's not adjusting to the schedule, how do you take that? If a child has a lot of trouble at drop off, what is the process for helping them? Is there anything that, you found that works that, can prepare us and them? I think you can also talk to other parents. It's a tough one because no one sends their child to a daycare feeling like it's not a great spot,
Mm-hmm.
so it can be a little bit biased, but anonymous posts on family, Facebook boards can be helpful, and getting some, information from both sides of the spectrum. I think also, can I come into the daycare? Like, can I come in and observe? That wasn't an option during COVID times. Like we couldn't even really tour facilities, but just to take a peek and look in, like, are the caretakers, are they sitting on the floor with the kids? Are they ignoring kids who cry? Are they, do they have genuine joy in their interactions? Are they affectionate with the kids? Do you like what you see? Being able to look in, just take a peek, I think can really speak volumes that you're not going to necessarily even get asking the same kind of boilerplate questions. And then, comes the motherly intuition or the fatherly or parently intuition, does this feel right for my child?
One thing that was important to us, my daughter was it wasn't a daycare, it was a preschool, but similar, they still cared during the day for my child. And she was the only one, she did an aftercare there and she napped, and she was the only one that napped. And it was really important to me that she kept napping. And they, like, maybe 2 weeks before we started up again in September, this is many, many years ago, they emailed like, yeah, due to enrollment, we're going to have to take the nap option away. And I'm thinking, I have to now take my child's, I know. So for me, that was a deal breaker. So I found another place, luckily. And so for listeners, what's the schedule? Is it consistent? Do they include naps? I know you said that one of your daycares or your daycare did have a nap schedule. And for some, it's important. And others like, no, I want my child to nap on their time. So I would say schedule. And if nap's important, is that included? So I'm just throwing my own 2 cents of questions to ask about.
I'll second that. Yeah.
So as we wrap this up, thank you for also sharing your own experience, because I know you had a wonderful article, Nanny versus Daycare, which is right for you. I appreciate that you shared your own personal experience as well as really gave options for people to think about. Is there anything else about the daycare option we should talk, or daycare or nanny option we should talk about?
I think that they're just great options, no matter, where you go. Daycare or childcare in general, it's not just a necessity for many parents, but it can be a luxury. But at the end of the day, I think making sure that you have the care you need, just figuring out what you need in terms of coverage realistically, is so important for a new parent's mental health, for your relationships, for your sense of self. Just getting the care you need, no matter what it looks like, I think is like certainly the pillar of all things good in early parenthood.
This is so important. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back.
In a world where single moms face countless challenges, the Single Mom Podcast offers a space of support and empowerment. Each episode offers stories of triumph, practical strategies, and heartfelt support to those on the journey of solo parenting. With a touch of humor and a wealth of inspiration, this podcast invites single moms everywhere to join a community that understands and uplifts. Discover the power of shared experiences and the strength of single mothers, because together they are truly unstoppable.
We're back. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new and expectant parents?
So I guess the big one is to just realize that this might not be the season for you and your family to, save tons of money or have kind of, an ideal childcare situation. The big thing is know you're going to have to invest in it. It's going to be better for you in the long run, and just try. And if it doesn't work, keep trying. It's hard to change your childcare situation, but if it's not working out for you, there are so many other options, and there is an arrangement for every family that works, that, makes sure that the child is happy, the parent is guilt-free. It's okay to get full or full-ish time help. It's okay to get what you need. And it's also okay to listen to yourself, listen to your kids. If your kid's freaking out at drop off for weeks on end, they're not happy, and there's going to be something else out there that makes them very happy. So it's daunting to figure it out, but it is a worthwhile endeavor, and you'll figure it out.
Thank you. Where can people find your work?
So thank you for asking. I'm very excited about my recently launched Substack. It's called More Than Mom, and it explores parenting and identity and all of the questions that keep new parents up at night. I have some really exciting interviews coming with experts like Dr. Becky and so many other fun voices in the parenting space, among them my own. I love the personal essay and sharing more about my parenting journey. So there's that. And then my best work, which is pictures of my children, of course, is available on Instagram. My handle is EJ Narins, Narins. That's my last name.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really enjoyed this, and I'm confident that new parents out there that might be feeling overwhelmed by just the option of childcare, I think you gave some really solid information for them to chew on. So thank you for your time.
Of course, and good luck to all.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
You've made it through the first couple of years with your kiddo, and life is crazy. You need Parent Savers. Each week, we provide moms with the practical information they need to help preserve their sanity. With the help of our experts, parents of toddlers get the superhero strength they need to tackle the world and the next sturdy diaper. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Parent Savers podcast." Parent Savers, empowering new parents.